what happens when you build this massive political coalition specifically to defeat a ruling party, only to realize that the most dangerous opponent is, sitting right next to you at your own strategy table?
Yeah, that is the million-dollar question right now.
Right. Tracking the lead up to the 2027 elections, you probably already know that the opposition's master plan it hit a brick wall.
A very large, very sudden brick wall.
Exactly. So just yesterday, Peter Obi officially announced his exit from the African Democratic Congress, the ADC.
Right.
And this was the coalition that was explicitly designed to be the great unifier, right? It was meant to consolidate the entire opposition vote. But instead, it's just fracturing in real time before the race has even truly begun.
It really is. I mean, the speed at which this coalition unraveled is just remarkable. But what's truly eliminating, I think, is the underlying mechanism of that collapse.
Yeah.
Because it forces us to completely reevaluate the tactical landscape for 2027.
Yeah, absolutely. And to understand the actual mechanics of this collapse, we're drawing from some incredibly detailed source material today.
Right, featuring the commentary by Rufai.
Yes, exactly. A really comprehensive breakdown by political analyst Rufai.
I have an elaborate theatres to make. A couple of things. Number one, I think it's going to be the beginning of more troubles for the NDC because the litigations will begin. The litigations as regards even the registration of the NDC. Yeah. People that have not gone to court, they will go to court.
Well, there's already one attempt
to go to court, I know. So it will begin. Because you see, as Nigerians, the idea here is Obi not being on the ballot. That's the problem. So all the forces will do everything to ensure Obi doesn't get on the ballot. I do a lot of political mapping, and I know people that do political mapping. The ADC, APC, all the political parties have done political mapping. The only person that can give President Tinubu some push in this election is Obi. The first strategy is to ensure Obi doesn't get on the ballot. The crisis in the ADC was just because of that. Secondly, the point of Obi is always pivoting to other political parties. Let us go back to what history says. Exactly what happened in PDP, why Obi pivoted, that's what exactly happened in the ADC. Atiku was not willing to ensure that the rotation convention comes to pass. Atiku was not supposed to run in the 2020 election after he had run in the last term of the northern part election in 2019. And that was why the likes of Wiki went up in arms. And that's why sometimes, even if I blame Wiki for not being a party man, he had some justifications in his actions. And that was why Obi left. Obi kept on saying that if you zone it to the south, I'll fight for it. So it's not that he doesn't like to fight. In the case of the ADC, the Atiku camp had already hijacked most of the structure in the ADC. The state chairman we're talking about were already hijacked by the Atiku camp. Over the weekend, I walked the phone lines for my sources. I mean, we're political journalists. We walk our sources' phone line. Most of it was already a fait accompli. So there was no way Obi was going to be able to thrive or get a fair situation in this election process. That's why he left. Yes, I know he tried to be cute about it by saying my elder brother Atiku is because of the court case. Peter, Gregory, Obi, you and I know that it is not because of the court case that you left. It is because you were already boxed into a corner. You can write a statement to deny what I said. It's your prerogative. And you know you were already boxed into a corner. And because agreements were not listened to. Part of what I heard was discussed in the Ibadan consensus by one of my sources, I might be wrong, was that there was a conversation about the ADC candidate coming from the south. But people reneged against it. The Atiku team reneged against it. These are the things I'm walking the phone lines and my sources are saying. So, I know the Atiku camp will come out and debunk all the things I've said. It's for you to deny. It's for you to debunk. I mean, mine is for me to speak my truths and you to rebut. So, once that did not fall through and the consolidation had started, Obi had to leave because Obi wanted to be on the ballot. Yes, you might make an argument and say, why is he moving all around and everything? Hey, man has an ambition. For those that argue, why is Obi moving around? Why is Atiku still running as at 20 from 1993 up till now? And some people are saying, Atiku, this might be his last lap. This is not going to be his last lap. If Atiku is in good health, he will run in 2031. Mark that down. He has his ambition. Yes. You know, former Liverpool coach Bill Shankly famously said, people think football is about life and death, but they are wrong, it's more than life and death. For politicians, politics is more than life and death. Atiku Abubakar's ambition is to become the president of Nigeria. As long as he's in good health, he will keep running until he gets the ambition, the aspiration, and it's his goal. Secondly, what will this do? The first winner will be President Tinubu. But anyway, I had always known that they were going to disintegrate because there was no way they were going to agree in the first place, because the ambition of Atiku Abubakar was more palpable than stepping down. And when people kept on saying the other statesman, President Tinubu will make a lot of inroads, yes, also because he's also running with state might at this point in time, the power of incumbency. So it's not going to be as easy. And this is not a Buhari that allows things wrong. So the votes Obi said he got, the votes Obi got in the last election, he might not get as much because there will be many factors. The other argument I would like to make in the Southeast, you see, President Tinubu, they can tell you that they will give you votes in the Southeast. I'm not sure Nigeria's politics is so mature to the level that people in the Southeast will see Obi on the ticket and see you on the ticket and decide to vote you over Obi. It will be a miracle if Nigerian politics has gotten to that level. So, as regards the South, I've seen a lot of inroads. The South-South is quite split and all of that. But I think what will herald these elections even more that we should be careful about are the things about the electoral laws that have made it pretty much to rig. So it's going to be an election that, correct me if I'm wrong, and I pray I'm wrong on this, there might be a lot of rigging across board. President Tinubu will retain most of his southwestern states, and it will be even split. But with this that they've been able to do, I think they just opened the door for a President Tinubu second term easier than ever, which is a sad reality of things as we speak today because they can't come together. But let me even posit it further by arguing that if they were even together in the first place, would they have been able to beat an incumbent that knows how to use power? No, let's stop being delusional. I mean, Dr. Abati, let me punch you this morning. President Tinubu no be Jonathan.
We're going to dissect the escalating tension between Obi and Atiku Abubakar, examine how these internal power struggles fundamentally destroy opposition coalitions from the inside out.
And, crucially, map this current crisis onto previous political fractures in Nigeria.
Right, because this isn't exactly a new phenomenon.
No, not at all. Examining that historical context is critical because, these structural collapses, they don't just happen in a vacuum. There is a deeply ingrained pattern of behavior here.
Totally. But before we unpack those patterns, I really want to establish a very clear baseline for you, the listener.
Very important.
Yeah, because we are diving into heavily politically charged analysis today involving major figures from all sides of the aisle. So we want to be perfectly clear, we are not taking sides here.
Right. We are not endorsing these viewpoints either.
Exactly. Our goal is simply to impartially unpack the ideas, the claims, and the analysis contained right here in our source material. We're looking at the strategy, the mechanics of it all, not taking a political stance.
That is the absolute foundation of our analysis today.
Yeah.
We're examining the architecture of political maneuvering, specifically through the lens of Rufai Oseni's commentary, just to understand how power is actually consolidated and wielded in this specific ecosystem.
Right. So you might have read the headlines about, court cases and divisions, but to understand what really broke the ADC apart, we have to look at what happened when the cameras were turned off.
The hidden reality.
Exactly. So let's start with Sunday. Peter Obi releases his official statement confirming his exit from the coalition, and honestly, it reads like standard political diplomacy.
Very measured.
Very. He cites internal division, legal disputes, external influence, and a political climate of intimidation that he explicitly calls toxic.
Right. But he also goes out of his way to maintain respect.
He does. He explicitly states that he maintains deep respect for Atiku Abubakar and David Mark. He frames this entire exit as a structural failure of the party, entirely separate from any kind of personal feud.
It's a very careful tightrope to walk.
It is. Okay, let's unpack this for a second. It's like moving into a massive shared house with other people, right?
Yeah.
You're going to split the rent, build a great community.
A unified front.
Exactly. Only to wake up one morning and realize one of your roommates has secretly changed the locks on all the doors.
Wow.
You know? You aren't necessarily declaring a personal, emotional war on them as a human being, but the functional reality is that you literally cannot live in the building anymore. You're locked out.
That analogy captures the diplomatic cover perfectly, actually, because the official statement points to, abstract toxicity and endless litigation. But Rufai Oseni's analysis drops this Monday bombshell that just entirely strips away that diplomatic cover.
Oh, totally.
Rufai claims the actual catalyst for Obi's exit wasn't some vague sense of division. It was a highly coordinated weekend hijacking of the ADC state chairman, orchestrated directly by Atiku Abubakar's camp.
Okay, I really want to pause on this concept of a weekend hijack because it sounds a bit, I don't know, cinematic.
It does sound like a movie plot.
Right. Like, how does that functionally happen? How do you hijack the leadership of an entire political party over a 48-hour weekend? Does someone just, show up with a briefcase full of cash?
Well, according to the analysis, a weekend hijack is fundamentally about exploiting loopholes in a party's internal constitution.
Okay.
And leveraging immense resources precisely when the opposition is distracted. We're talking about quietly organizing sudden backdoor meetings.
While everyone else is looking the other way.
Exactly. They organize these meetings to pass votes of no confidence against state chairmen who happen to be loyal to Obi. Yeah. Rufai talks about using immense financial and political leverage to just suddenly flip delegate loyalties overnight. The party machinery, it isn't a static object,
Right, it's made of people.
It's a living ecosystem of influence. And Rufai's sources indicate that while Obi was bogged down dealing with the broader litigation, the public-facing aspects of the coalition,
press conferences, all that.
Right. While he's doing that, Atiku's camp was aggressively doing the subterranean work. They were capturing the specific people who actually hold the voting power within the party structure.
So it's less of a democratic election and much more of an internal legal coup.
Essentially, yes.
But see, what I don't understand is the discrepancy in tone here. If Obi has just been the victim of a ruthless, coordinated coup that literally stole the party machinery right out from under him,
why is he being so polite?
Yes. Why is his official statement so polite? Yeah. I mean, if someone changes the locks on your house, you usually don't release a press statement talking about how much you respect them as a person.
Well, you do if you understand the brutal reality of Nigerian political survival.
What do you mean by that?
In this arena, personal feelings are a luxury that politicians just cannot afford to indulge publicly. Control of the structure is the only metric that actually matters.
So it's purely pragmatic.
Completely. Rufai points out that Obi is trying to be, quote, cute about it by maintaining cordiality. But underneath that diplomacy is just the cold math of delegates and ward structures.
The math of who can actually vote for you.
Right. You don't declare a noisy, emotional war on the person who outmaneuvered you. You recognize that the room has been captured, you acknowledge the tactical defeat, and you quietly leave to find a new structure.
Because complaining about it doesn't get you the delegates back.
Exactly. The fight over who controls the state chairman, it isn't viewed as some massive moral failing. It's simply the ruthless mechanics of securing power.
Okay, so that brings us to a really massive question. How did they get to the point of a hostile takeover so quickly?
It was incredibly fast.
Right. I mean, the ADC was designed to be the ultimate opposition coalition. By April, you had these colossal political figures sitting on the exact same structure. On paper, it looks completely unstoppable.
On paper, yes.
But this source material suggests this coalition was basically a battlefield from day one.
Oh, absolutely. What's fascinating here is that the tension was woven right into the foundation. According to Rufai's political mapping, there were preliminary conversations and understandings when this coalition formed.
What kind of understanding?
Specifically regarding a Southern candidacy rotation. The underlying premise for a lot of people entering this coalition was that the unified front would eventually rally behind a Southern candidate.
With Peter Obi being the most obvious focal point for that.
Precisely. But Rufai alleges that the Atiku camp intentionally reneged on those agreements. They pushed against the consensus for a Southern ticket.
And how did they enforce that? Did they just argue about it in meetings?
No, they didn't rely on debate. They went straight for the machinery.
Okay, let's clearly define what we mean by machinery for anyone who maybe isn't steeped in the day-to-day of party politics. Because we hear terms like ward structures and state chapters constantly.
Yeah, it can get a bit technical. So when analysts talk about capturing ward structures, they aren't talking about winning over everyday voters on the street.
Right, it's not a popularity contest with the public.
No, it's about controlling the actual delegates who vote in the primary elections.
Yeah.
A political party is essentially a private club.
I like that, a private club.
Yeah, and the primary determines who gets to represent that club. If you control the ward chairman, you dictate who is legally allowed to step into the room to cast a vote for the presidential ticket.
So by capturing those specific individuals, Atiku's camp basically neutralized Obi's influence inside the coalition entirely.
Entirely. It doesn't matter how popular Obi is with the general public.
Right, if he can't get past the bouncer at the club.
Exactly. If he cannot get the votes of the specific delegates required to win the party's ticket, his public popularity is structurally useless.
Wow. Now, Rufai mentions this concept of political mapping as the driving force behind this aggression. What does that actually look like in this context? I mean, why target your own coalition partner so aggressively?
Well, political mapping is basically the cold, data-driven analysis of the electoral landscape. Every major camp is looking at the numbers, voter concentration, historical turnout, demographic shifts.
And what did the numbers tell them?
The data clearly points to Peter Obi as the primary, perhaps the only, statistical threat capable of giving the incumbent, President Bola Tinubu, a real challenge.
So Obi is the guy to beat.
Right. Therefore, the strategic reality shifts completely. The most efficient way for an opponent to secure their own path, even an opponent sitting in the very same coalition, is not to try and beat Obi at the polls.
It's to keep him off the ballot entirely.
Keep him off the ballot entirely. If you control the party structure, you control who gets the ticket.
So the crisis engineered within the ADC, according to Rufai, was designed specifically for that purpose. It was just a race to secure the foundation so that Obi would have no legal platform to stand on.
It is a strategy of eliminating your strongest competition before the race is even officially called.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. The irony here is that Peter Obi knows exactly how this trap works. Because, I mean, this isn't his first time having the locks changed on him.
Not at all.
If you've been following his career, he has a very distinct history of pivoting when the structure turns against him. He didn't just arrive at the ADC from nowhere.
Right. He left the Labour Party after prolonged internal crises.
Yeah. And then he moved into the ADC coalition space, and many views it as a fresh start. But the exact same tactical ghosts followed him right into the new house.
They absolutely did. And Rufai draws a very direct, unavoidable parallel between this current collapse and the past failures of the PDP. We are basically watching a repeating historical cycle here.
So let's trace that lineage for the listener. What happened with the PDP?
Well, after the 2019 election, there was an established rotation convention within the PDP. Atiku had run his term, representing the northern part of the ticket. Rotation, the established convention of the party, was that he would step aside and allow the presidential rotation to shift to the south for the 2023 cycle.
Right. But he refused to step aside.
He refused. He held on to his ambition to run again in 2023, completely ignoring the rotation agreement, and that specific refusal is what caused the party to fracture back then.
Which had massive ripple effects.
Huge ripple effects. Rufai points out that figures like Nyesom Waik, who got a lot of public criticism for, not being a team player.
Right. People said he was just being difficult.
Exactly. But Rufai notes Waik actually had significant structural justification for his anger based on those broken agreements.
And crucially, that exact breach of convention is what drove Peter Obi to leave the PDP in the first place, right?
Yes. Obi's stance was clear. If you zone it to the south, I will stay and fight for it. But when the structure was captured and the zoning agreement was tossed out the window, he had to pivot. That's when he went to the Labour Party.
It's crazy. It's like looking at a corporate merger where two CEOs agree to share power, but one secretly buys up 51% of the voting shares the day before the board meeting.
That's a perfect way to put it.
The company technically still exists, but the power dynamic is completely hijacked. Personal ambition just completely overrides any internal agreements or structural fairness.
And this raises an important question, I think, about the nature of political ambition. I mean, why risk destroying the entire coalition?
Yeah, why fracture your own support base just to secure the top spot on a ticket that might now be doomed to lose?
Rufai answers this by citing a really famous quote from the former Liverpool football manager, Bill Shankly.
Oh, I love this quote.
It's so fitting.
Oh.
Shankly once said, "People think football is a matter of life and death. They are wrong. It is more than life and death." And Rufai applies that directly to the mindset of these politicians. For them, securing the presidency isn't just a career goal. It is more than life and death.
That is such an intense way to view public service.
It is intense, but it explains the behavior we're analyzing. Rufai's insight into Atiku Abubakar is that his ambition to become the president is unwavering. It's deeply palpable.
He's not going to just quietly retire.
Not according to Rufai. He makes a very firm prediction. If Atiku is in good health, he will continue to run until 2031 to achieve this lifelong goal.
So when ambition is that deeply entrenched in a politician's identity, stepping down for the strategic good of a coalition simply isn't an option.
It doesn't exist on their menu of options. The personal ambition is fundamentally larger than the party, is larger than the coalition itself.
So an unstoppable force of ambition meets the fragile structure of a coalition, and the coalition breaks.
Every time.
It broke the PDP, it fractured the Labour Party, and now it has absolutely shattered the ADC. So let's look at the actual mathematics of this for the 2027 election.
The real-world impact.
Right. So what does this all mean for you, the voter? Because Rufai paints an incredibly grim picture for anyone hoping for a change in administration.
Very grim. Because the opposition has essentially cannibalized itself, the biggest beneficiary of the ADC's collapse isn't Atiku, and it certainly isn't Obi.
Who is it?
The biggest winner is the incumbent, President Bola Tinubu.
Right.
Rufai outlines the massive compounding advantages that Tinubu now holds going into 2027.
Yeah.
First, you have the sheer power of incumbency, which Rufai refers to as state might.
State might. That's a heavy phrase. What does that encompass?
An incumbent has the vast apparatus of the state. They have the resources, the institutional leverage, the visibility, all at their disposal.
Uphill battle for anyone challenging them.
Always. But second, the geographic political map now heavily favors a unified ruling party against a fractured opposition.
Let's break down the math on that geographic map, because this is crucial. Rufai predicts Tinubu will likely retain most of the southwestern states, but he also mentions the south-south region being heavily split. So explain how vote splitting actually works in this specific context.
Vote splitting is basically the mathematical nightmare of a divided opposition.
Okay.
Imagine a region where 80% of the voters actively want to vote the incumbent out of office.
So an overwhelming majority wants change.
Yes. Now, if the opposition is unified behind one single candidate, that candidate easily wins the region with 80% of the vote. Done deal.
Right.
But if the opposition fractures into 3 different parties, that 80% anti-incumbent vote gets divided up. One opposition candidate gets 30%, another gets 25%, another gets 25%.
Oh, I see.
Meanwhile, the incumbent, who is holding a solid unified base of just 20%.
Suddenly, they have a highly competitive path.
Exactly. They could even win, simply because the majority cannibalized its own numbers by splitting across different tickets.
Wow. And even in the Southeast, which has traditionally been a huge stronghold for Obi, Rufai makes a very sobering point about ticket positioning, right?
He does. Because a lot of people might think, well, Obi will just run on a smaller party ticket and his supporters will follow him anywhere.
Right, the grassroots movement.
But Rufai doubts that the Nigerian electorate as a whole has matured to the level where voters would eagerly look for Obi on a secondary smaller party ticket and overwhelmingly vote for him over the established, heavily funded power structures.
So without that massive coalition backing him, recreating the organic momentum he had in the last election becomes immensely difficult.
Immensely difficult. Rufai says it would basically require a political miracle.
And Rufai also touches on something that goes beyond just voter turnout and geographic mapping. He brings up these darker warnings about the mechanics of the election itself.
Yes, specifically regarding electoral laws.
Right. He argues that the current legal framework makes it easier to manipulate or even rig outcomes. Can you elaborate on why a fractured opposition makes that threat worse?
It's a dark variable in his analysis for sure. Rufai openly states his fear regarding widespread manipulation. And if you consider the logistics, it makes sense.
How so?
Well, a unified opposition coalition can pool its resources. They can deploy agents to monitor thousands of polling units across the entire country.
They have eyes everywhere.
Exactly. And they can mount a massive unified legal challenge if discrepancies arise. But a fractured opposition, they simply cannot do that.
They don't have the funding or the manpower.
Right. When you combine an incumbent who, as Rufai notes, knows how to use power, with an opposition that is distracted by infighting and totally drained of resources, the systemic checks and balances just fail.
It's like they're too busy fighting each other in the locker room to actually play the game on the field.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Rufai is essentially asking the public to stop being delusional. If the opposition couldn't beat an entrenched incumbent when they were somewhat together, their chances are mathematically devastating now that they're divided.
Which highlights the ultimate tragedy of the coalition model for the public. I mean, these massive political alliances, they are always marketed to the voters as vehicles for public service.
Always. We are uniting for you.
Exactly. They're sold as a way to unite the country, bring about necessary change. But when the party simply devolves into this vicious battlefield for ownership,
when it's just about who controls the delegates.
Yes. When the entire political cycle is just a fight over who holds the legal title deed to the party machinery, the voters are left with nothing but noise. The democratic process is stripped of actual choice.
The conversation completely shifts away from policy.
Right.
Instead of debating governance or the economy or the future of the nation, the entire political discourse is just consumed by court cases, hijacked delegates, and internal power plays.
The politics of control entirely swallows the politics of service.
Beautifully put, yes.
Well, let's quickly recap the incredible journey we've taken through this source material today. We started with the surface level news, Peter Obi's official exit from the ADC, where he cited a toxic environment and legal disputes while remaining, exceedingly polite.
Very diplomatic.
But then, digging into Rufai Oseni's analysis, we uncovered the hidden reality. We looked at the tactical weekend hijacking of the party's state structures by Atiku's camp.
A deliberate, calculated move to capture the delegates and physically box Obi out of the Southern candidacy.
Exactly. And then we mapped that specific power play against the historical pattern of failed coalitions in Nigeria.
Seeing how unchecked personal ambition consistently overrides structural agreements.
And finally, we broke down the grim mathematical reality for 2027. We examined how vote splitting, a lack of resources, and a totally distracted opposition pave a significantly easier road for the incumbent, President Tinubu.
Leaving the voters with fractured alternatives, it truly is a masterclass in how power is wielded long before anyone steps into a voting booth.
It reinforces the reality that understanding the internal mechanics of party structures is just as important, if not more important, than following the public campaign trails.
Absolutely. The real game is played in the structure.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. By looking past the official press releases and understanding the cold, hard logic of political mapping and delegate capture, you get to see the actual machinery of power at work.
It changes how you view every headline.
It really does. And I want to leave you with a final, slightly provocative thought to mull over today. Something that pushes beyond the immediate tactical failures we've just discussed.
Okay, let's hear it.
Think back to the sheer vulnerability of the ADC's party structure. If traditional political parties, the state chairman, the ward delegates, the legal registrations, if they are so easily captured, bought, or hijacked by the most entrenched actors over a single weekend,
right,
is the political party model itself completely obsolete for genuine opposition movements in Nigeria?
Oh, that is a big question.
Will the only viable path forward for a candidate who actually wants to survive long enough to make it onto the ballot be to completely abandon these fragile structures? Will they have to build a totally decentralized, structureless movement? Can you win an election without a party machinery, or is the machinery the only way to play the game? Think about it.
A fascinating dilemma for the future.
Until next time, keep looking beneath the surface.